Hello everybody, welcome back to Cam Good Times. This week I'm feeling a little under the weather, fortunately not with COVID, but some kind of flu bug. And so I figured this would be a good opportunity for me to take a moment and do a little comparison review. I have had some experience riding in a budget wizard setup and in the full wizard setup, and I figured it might be helpful to people to have a little bit of comparison to look for. So today I'll be comparing my FR1 setup and my full wizard setup with the Seba SX carbon boot. And you'll notice I've used different frames. I've used the NN Ronin frames, the 4x100 on my FR1s. I've also used the NN Dragon frames, which are the 5x80, which are perhaps a little more similar to this frame right here, the Wizard Advanced, with exception to the 100mm wheels on the front and back and the 80mm wheels on the bottom here. And so some reference point there. They're still a little different, but hopefully I can give some ideas of what the differences might feel like in both setups. So first of all, I'll start out with comfort. I will say that this FR1 setup for me with the Intuition V2 liner has been a little more comfortable than my Wizard boot, just because the plastic tends to have a bit more malleability, a little bit more shock absorption than the carbon, but not a whole lot of difference. I would say that the comfort on both are still superior to me. I love the Intuition liners in both. Just so you all know, I have flat feet, and so fortunately the Intuition liners do a wonderful job of just conforming to my flat feet and giving me enough support without even having to use orthotics. Not always the case for everyone, and that's a very personal thing to figure out because everyone's feet are different. But at least for me, just the natural heat molding, or not even heat molding, I heat molded these ones, but I just naturally let these mold to my feet. Either way, both of them fit wonderfully to my feet, along with the arch support that both of them have. So very comfortable. I would give this one a 10 out of 10 in comfort. It's really just superior with the nice balance of rigidity and flex and the comfort of the liner in it. And this one I would still give a 9 out of 10. It's still just fine. I absolutely love this skate. I can go around for miles in it and be all right. The second area I'll talk about is support. With the FR1 here, because it's a plastic boot, it is not as supportive as carbon. Still amazing though, still quite good, especially with the Intuition V2 liner in there. It allowed me to downsize this boot to a size 40, which is the size that I have both boots in, because it's a thinner liner. Both of them are thinner liners, and that enabled me, I wear US size 8.5 men's shoes, so my feet are about 26.5 centimeters. And so my feet fit great into both of these. Because it's downsized, I just have awesome control in this. It's a lot easier for me to maneuver, and the lateral support's great with this cuff. I also upgraded this to, instead of using the 45-degree ratchet, I used the what's the word? I used the Velcro strap for this, and that was fantastic too. I could really just buckle this down nicely that way. So that's been good. I would say in terms of support, even though I use a 4x100 frame on this, it still works quite well. I'm able to carve nice and sharp, things like that. It is not quite as supportive when it comes to like one-footed tricks, but still really good. I would give this probably an 8 out of 10 in support, and my Seba SX boot would be about a 10 out of 10, because this is just as really as supportive as it gets. It feels like a total extension of your own body. It's just there, and it's perfect. And that also leads to the idea of energy transfer as another category. I would say that because this is a little more flexy, and because it's a 165 mount with a little bit of a higher up, there's a bit more of a gap here between your foot and where the wheels are, There's not quite as much energy transfer, but it's still decent. Still works quite well. And of course with this, I mean, you're very low to the ground. This is as low as you can possibly get to the wheels and to the ground. And because it's a UFS mount, it's just really solid on there to the boot, I would say the energy transfer here is just superior as well. This, again, probably an 8 out of 10, and this a 10 out of 10 in terms of that category. Now, ease of moves, I've talked about this a little bit earlier. Again, you can do most any wizard moves in this kind of setup. It is a little trickier, especially when you are a little bit raised up off the ground, and it feels a little more wobbly, especially when you're doing those one-footed tricks. It does have comfier landings, however, when you're going down staircases or jumps, because this plastic boot absorbs a bit more of the shock. It does feel a little more comfy with that, or it's just, I guess it's I don't know, maybe a little bit better in that way, but not much. I still do just fine. I can stair bash in these all day long, and they do fantastic. It might give my feet a little bit of pain if I really hit a lot of jumps or go out the skate park hard in these, but now that these are broken in pretty well, it's really not that bad. If you want to, you can always go for the plastic Seba SX option, which is actually less expensive, but I really prefer having the control with the carbon. It's quite nice. Mounting, so ease of moves, I would say I would give this more a 7 out of 10. It's a little less. It's just not quite dialed in the same way as a full setup, wizard setup. Still good though. This definitely a 10 out of 10. This is just the original thing. This is how this was built in a way that was meant for making these tricks as smooth as possible. So absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely love these frames as well, by the way, for that reason. It's just so buttery smooth. The mounting is something also to consider. With 165 mount, if you see here, it does, one advantage to that is it allows you to slide the frame back and forth for pronation, overpronation, or oversupination of the foot. So that way, if you're, I don't remember exactly how they do it, but you can shift it over a little bit if your foot is leaning in too far and whatnot. You can't do that with the UFS boot, which is a con. But the problem with that is unless you use a lot of Loctite on your bolts here when you're mounting in that frame, it can tend to slide around back and forth pretty easily. And especially if you're really hitting things hard, if you're doing a lot of jumps or doing some really deep carves a lot, I've noticed that this frame, or any frame on this boot, can tend to shift a little bit over time. Even with Loctite, it takes some time for it to shift, but it does shift, which is kind of a bummer, because then you have to take the wheels off, shift it back in place, put on some Loctite again, and get it back in where it needs to be. Not a horrible issue, but that is a disadvantage. It is advantageous, however, that you do have the back and forth shifting of the frame. That's something you can't do with the wizard frames. I have seen people modify their wizard frames, put a different hole next to the original UFS mount hole so it can shift over. But again, I think for me at least, I feel great in how these boots are. It's just straight perpendicular to the ground for me. And so, but I could see where that can become a problem if somebody has some foot issues that require adjustment and you can't adjust laterally. However, the nice thing about the UFS mount is it doesn't have that shifting. It's just locked straight onto that boot. So when you're really moving around, putting a lot of pressure on this frame, it doesn't shift on you at all. The boot might get, or rather the bolts might get loose over time, but if you have it tightened on well, it'll stay on there nice and firm. So in terms of mounting, at least for me, I still give this a 10 out of 10 with how solid it is. And it's also with the mounting, it's a lower ride height, so that's fantastic. And with this, because it shifts a little bit, I give it about a 9 out of 10. The mounting's still solid. I do love these there are all these metal plates on the bottom of the FR1 boots that do give a nice, good, solid connection between the frame and the boot anyway, so it does work quite well. That's just one disadvantage, I would say. Now, finally, durability. I love the durability of both of these boots. I would say that this is still superior when it comes to that. At the same time, this plastic boot is really solid. I've put it through, you can see all kinds of scuffs on here. I've put it through all kinds of abuse. I have crashed a bajillion times in these things, and they're holding up really well. They show no signs of cracks or other trouble spots. The only thing that has bothered me with this FR1 design is the cuff up here. Or at least one of two. There's another little thing. So this cuff right here, it tends, this little buckle part, it tends to crack where that screw is. And it hasn't just happened for me, it's happened for a lot of people riding these. It's just, this FR cuff is just not as thick as the Seba one, and so it has that tendency. However, sometimes you get lucky, like with this cuff, I bought this one aftermarket, it's held up real nice, but just sometimes you're not as lucky. I would suggest this though, if you can, find the Seba cuff to replace this with, and that will just totally eliminate that problem altogether. The Seba here has essentially the same cuff, but it's the Seba brand, and not even close to having that issue, because as you can see here, the plastic here where that screw is just super thick. It's quite a significant difference, and so it just holds real nicely. I have not had any issues with that here. I will say that, like I said earlier, I have replaced that 45-degree strap with the Velcro, and the reason being is when I had the 45-degree ratchet strap on there, it has some sharp corners that were cutting into my Intuition liners, and that was not so great. And at the same time, I couldn't ratchet it down nearly as heavily as I can with the Velcro. And so that's another thing I took out just for personal preference. It may not necessarily cut into all boots, but that happened on mine after about 1.5 years of riding it. And so overall durability, I would give this one a 9 out of 10 because of the cuff issue, but that's fixable if you want to get an aftermarket Seba cuff for this. This 10 out of 10, it's had zero problems. It's just solid. It shows no signs of any kind of major wear or tear after I've put it through quite a bit the past few months, and it's just holding up so well. So there you have it. I really truly hope that this was a helpful review to those of you who are interested in going down this rabbit hole of wizard skating. And let me know if you have any questions or comments below, and I'd be happy to try to answer them the best of my ability. And in the meantime, keep getting out there and skating. My best of wishes in all of your blading endeavors, and I'll talk to you again soon.